welcome to our deep dive today. It's on the evolution of media and society.
Ooh, very relevant.
You bet.
Yeah.
And you've given us a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
I have.
From broad historical overviews to some very specific analysis of radio and TV in Slovakia.
Yep.
So we're going on a whirlwind tour today of how humans have communicated
We are.
from like small villages to the massive online world that we live in now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about. Like when you lay it all out,
Yeah,
it's a lot.
How much things have changed.
Totally.
And it's not even just about like how we get information.
Right.
It's about how these changes from the printing press to the internet have changed. How we see the world.
Yeah.
How we even think about who we are.
Yeah.
And even how we act when we're in groups.
Totally. And how we act together.
Yeah.
So to really get this,
Yeah.
we need to start way back.
Way back.
Before Instagram and TikTok even existed.
Like no social media.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
We've got some big thinkers to guide us.
Okay.
Sociologists, philosophers, folks who are really trying to understand this stuff.
Perfect.
You ready to dive in?
I am ready.
Let's start with a picture of what life was like before mass media.
Okay.
Think about a small traditional village.
Bye.
The kind Miloslav Petrusko describes.
Okay.
Everyone knows everyone else and news travels by word of mouth, and your whole world is basically that village.
So no scrolling through endless feeds
No.
or getting bombarded with news from like across the globe.
Nope. You're in your own little world.
That must have been a totally different experience of time too.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Without newspapers or radio or TV,
Yeah.
you'd have a much stronger sense of the present moment.
Yeah.
Life probably felt more cyclical,
Yeah.
you know, with traditions and routines passed down for generations.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Imagine that sense of timelessness.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's hard for us to even fathom now,
Right.
but then things start to change.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
With the Industrial Revolution in the
The
1700s,
1700.
it wasn't just new machines like the steam engine. It was a whole new way of life.
Right. So it's more than just technology.
It's technology plus social change.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution created this massive wave of change.
Yeah.
People were moving to cities for factory jobs.
Right.
Mass production was taking off.
Huh?
And more people were learning to read.
Okay. So we have a more literate population.
Yeah, and so you have this rise of individualism.
Individualism. Okay.
People are less tied to those small, tight-knit communities.
Like those villages we were talking about.
Exactly. They're kind of on their own in these big cities.
Interesting.
So we're talking about a different kind of society emerging.
So what do we call this new kind of society?
Well, this is where the idea of mass society comes in.
Mass society.
Large, complex societies.
Okay.
Where people are more connected through
Through what?
things like mass-produced goods,
Okay.
shared media experiences, rather than those close-knit, face-to-face relationships.
So it's like we're connected by these bigger things,
Yeah.
these bigger forces.
And as all of this is happening,
Okay.
you've got the printing press hitting the scene.
Ooh, the printing press. Big one.
In the early 1800s,
Okay.
it's a total game changer
Yeah.
for how information spreads.
Right, because now instead of just like word of mouth,
Yeah.
you can actually
Put it down.
write it down
Yeah.
and send it out.
Exactly. Suddenly, ideas could spread much faster,
Yeah.
reach a way bigger audience,
Mm-hmm.
and it fueled this growing sense of individualism.
Individualism again.
Right, because people had access to so many different viewpoints. They could read all these different things.
It's almost like the early days of the internet,
Yeah.
except with paper and ink instead of screens.
Huh. There are some parallels there for sure.
Yeah.
But even back then,
Yeah.
there were thinkers already raising concerns about what this meant for society.
So even then people were like,
Yeah.
hold on a second.
Yeah, what is this doing to us?
Yeah.
For example, Jürgen Habermas,
Okay.
he talked about the emergence of the public sphere.
The public sphere.
This was a space where people could debate and discuss important issues.
Sounds great.
It was.
But I feel like you're about to tell me there's a catch.
Well, Habermas pointed out that this public sphere was quickly taken over by the pursuit of profit.
Oh, so it's not this like
Pure space.
space of ideas.
Yeah.
Newspapers, pamphlets, they became businesses.
Oh, right. So it becomes about money.
It's about money.
Yeah.
So even back then, there was this tension
Tension between what?
between the ideal of open public discourse
Okay.
and the realities of a media system driven by money.
Driven by money.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how different or similar things are today. For sure. So early 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
we got Habermas.
Yeah.
Were there other thinkers trying to make sense of all this?
Oh, yeah. definitely.
Okay, who else?
Friedrich Nietzsche, he was really critical of mass culture. Nietzsche, okay.
Even back in the mid to late 1800s,
Okay.
he was worried about the shallowness of mass-produced entertainment.
He saw that even then.
Yeah, he thought it could stifle independent thought.
So he was like, hey, don't just blindly consume whatever's being thrown at you.
Yeah.
Think for yourself.
Think critically.
I feel like we still need that reminder today.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And around the same time,
Okay.
Gustave Le Bon was studying the French Revolution.
Le Bon. Okay.
Yeah, he was fascinated by how crowds could get swept up in emotions and act irrationally.
Oh, wow. Crowd psychology.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So you can see how that ties into this whole idea of mass media.
I can see it, yeah.
Right. So we have these early thinkers starting to grapple with
With what?
the power of mass communication
Okay.
to influence not just what people think,
Yeah?
but how they behave,
So how they act.
how they act. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how long these questions have been around.
Yeah, like we think we're dealing with them now for the first time.
But we're not.
But these are old questions.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Well, as mass media keeps expanding, in the early 1900s,
Early 1900s.
you have the Frankfurt School coming in
The Frankfurt School.
with a pretty sharp critique of what they called the culture industry.
The culture industry.
Yeah, they saw how art and culture were
Yeah.
being turned into commodities,
Okay.
just products to be consumed.
So it's not just about access to information anymore.
No,
It's about...
it's about how that information is shaped
Okay.
by powerful forces
Right.
and how it shapes us in turn.
So it shapes us.
It shapes us, yeah.
This is heavy stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
And this leads us to a really important question that we're still grappling with today.
What's that?
How do we maintain our individual thinking, our critical minds,
Yeah.
in a world saturated with mass-produced messages?
That's a question for the ages, I feel like.
It really is.
Okay, so that brings us from traditional societies all the way to this idea of mass societies.
Exactly.
Now we're going to move into the 20th century
Okay.
and see how these trends play out in a very specific place, Slovakia,
All right.
with the development of radio and television.
Let's do it.
Coming up after the break.
So we've talked about all these big thinkers grappling with mass media and its implications.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in,
It is.
for sure.
But now let's zoom in on how all this played out in Slovakia.
Go ahead, Slovakia.
It's a great case study to see how those global trends we've been talking about
Yeah.
took shape in a specific place.
Right, because like every country is going to have its own unique media history.
Absolutely.
So where do we start with Slovakia?
Well, radio broadcasting really takes off there in the mid-20th century.
20th century, okay.
And at first, a lot of those radio journalists were drawing on those familiar formats from newspapers.
Yeah.
You know, news flashes, reports, interviews.
So they were kind of like adapting.
Yeah, they were adapting print for this new
Right,
radio.
For radio, yeah.
I could just picture like families gathered around the radio.
Listening to the news just like they used to read it in the paper.
Absolutely. And then in the 1950s,
Okay.
television arrives in Slovakia.
Here comes TV.
Now information entertainment, it's all coming visually directly into people's homes.
It's huge.
It was massive.
Yeah.
Not just in Slovakia, but all over the world.
Right. It's like that moment where everything changed.
Yeah.
The way people got their news,
Totally.
the way they spend their evenings, even how they thought about the world.
Absolutely. TV became this incredibly powerful tool for shaping public opinion, promoting national identity,
Wow.
and of course, advertising.
Of course.
But even as television took off,
Yeah.
there was always this tension
Tension between...
public and commercial broadcasters
Right, that whole debate about...
about who controls the airwaves
Yeah.
and what kind of content gets prioritized.
So are you going with public service?
Right.
With like the focus on education and information?
Yeah.
Or you going with commercial broadcasting? That's all about profit and entertainment.
Exactly.
That's a tough one.
It is. And that tension was and still is a big part of the media landscape in Slovakia.
It's interesting how that keeps coming up.
It does.
Yeah.
So as radio and TV become more and more embedded in people's lives, it sparks a whole new wave of thinkers trying to analyze their effects.
Okay, so new media, new analysis.
Exactly.
What are we talking about here?
Well, you've got folks like Roland Barthes.
Roland Barthes.
Okay. He was fascinated by how images could carry these hidden messages,
Ooh, hidden messages.
these modern myths.
Okay.
He was really good at deconstructing the stuff we see in advertising and the media.
Like he was saying.
Don't just take these images at face value.
Right.
Think about what they're really selling you.
That's good advice.
It is.
Then we have Umberto Eco.
Yes, Umberto Eco exploring the impact of mass media on culture,
Okay.
especially the rise of what he called kitsch culture.
Kitsch culture. What's that?
Think of it like all those cheesy souvenirs you see everywhere.
Okay.
Mass-produced, often sentimental stuff.
Got it.
Eco is asking some tough questions
Heck, what?
about what happens to art and authenticity
Okay.
in a world of mass reproduction.
So it's like Barthas is showing us how media manipulates our desires.
Yeah.
And Eco's questioning whether mass-produced culture makes us less discerning. What other angles were these thinkers exploring?
Well, Elias Canetti dove deep into crowd dynamics.
Crowd dynamics like Le Bon.
Yeah, kinda, but Canetti went beyond just saying crowds can be irrational.
Okay.
He really broke down the different types of crowds and how they can be formed and influenced, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad.
And this is all relevant to understanding media.
Oh, absolutely,
right.
because media can mobilize people.
Right.
It can bring them together.
For better or worse.
Exactly.
Then there's today's Zesepa.
Yeah, Zesepa, he was specifically critical of television.
Critical of television.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was raising alarm bells about the potential downsides.
Like what kind of downsides?
How TV can be addictive.
Okay.
How it can make people passive.
Uh-huh.
How it can disconnect us from real-life experiences.
So this isn't just some abstract intellectual debate.
No.
It's about the very real ways media was changing how people lived,
Yeah.
how they thought,
Uh-huh.
and how they connected with each other.
Exactly.
So it's getting really real.
It is.
Yeah.
And as we move into the late 20th century,
Late 20th century.
someone like Douglas Kellner comes along,
Okay. Douglas Kellner.
and he's like, hey, media isn't just entertainment.
Okay.
It's a core part of how we form our identities and political views.
Right.
He called it media culture.
Media culture.
It's like we don't just consume media.
Yeah.
We live in it.
We live in it.
It shapes who we are, how we see ourselves.
That's a great way to put it.
And then as we approach the 21st century,
Like, here we go.
the internet explodes onto the scene. No, we're not just talking about mass media.
Yeah.
We're talking about this constant, overwhelming flow of information.
Right. And things start changing even faster.
It's just so much faster.
This feels like the perfect moment to bring in Gilles Lipovetsky
Yeah, Lipovetsky.
and his concept of hypermodernity.
Exactly. He describes this world
This hypermodern world.
where technology changes so rapidly that we're constantly chasing the new thing.
Oh, yeah. The upgrade.
Yeah, consumerism is rampant. Everything feels sped up.
Yeah.
Novelty becomes an obsession.
Does that sound familiar? Oh, yeah. I think we're all living that right now.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
And this hypermodern world brings us back to some of those earlier critiques.
Okay. How so?
Well, for example, how do Nietzsche's warnings about mass culture hold up in the internet age?
Right. Where we're bombarded with information 24/7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what about Habermas's public sphere?
That ideal space for discussion and debate.
Is it even more fractured now?
Right?
That we can all retreat into our own online echo chambers?
So we're more connected than ever.
Yeah,
But are we actually communicating?
that's the question.
That's a big question.
These are huge questions.
Yeah.
And they're especially relevant as we look at some very specific developments in Slovakia's media landscape in recent years.
Okay. I'm curious, what kind of developments are we talking about?
Well, one of the biggest was the merging of public service radio and television
Okay.
into a single entity called RTVS back in 2010.
RTVS. Okay.
It was an attempt to streamline things and strengthen public broadcasting in Slovakia.
So bringing it all together.
Exactly.
That sounds like a pretty massive undertaking.
It was.
What were some of the challenges that came with that?
Well, remember, this was happening as the internet and digital platforms were already shaking things up for traditional media.
Right. So it's not just about merging two organizations.
Right.
It's about adapting to this whole new media landscape.
Exactly. And RTVS had to figure out how to stay relevant.
Right, because now you have so many other options.
So many choices for news and entertainment.
So it's a whole different ballgame.
Totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
There were restructurings, staff reductions, a big push to develop new digital platforms alongside traditional radio and TV.
So trying to do it all.
Yeah, it was a pretty tumultuous time for those working in public media.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I'm sure it sparked some pretty heated debates
About
the role of public broadcasting in the 21st century.
right, like what should the priorities be
Exactly.
in this new world?
Should it be about high-quality news and information?
Oh,
You know, countering the often sensationalist stuff from commercial media?
Okay.
Or should it be about promoting cultural diversity, supporting local artists?
Right.
And then there's this massive question of funding.
Right, because if public broadcasting is going to be independent,
Yeah.
and truly serve the public, it needs a stable source of funding.
It does. And in Slovakia, that question of funding took center stage in 2022.
2022.
When they introduced new media laws.
New media laws.
These laws aim to modernize the whole media sector.
The whole thing.
Covering everything from online content to the responsibilities of broadcasters.
So these new laws are trying to keep up with this rapidly changing media landscape.
Yeah, trying to play catch up.
What kind of impact did they have?
Well, one of the most controversial parts was the abolition of the public broadcasting fee in 2023.
The public broadcasting fee.
Up until then, RTVS relied on this fee from citizens as a major source of funding.
So it's like a tax that people paid.
Kind of. It was a fee that everyone who had a TV or radio had to pay. And that money went directly to RTVS.
So they got rid of that.
They did.
So now they're completely dependent on state funding.
They are.
It's a huge change.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And those who supported the fee abolition argued that it would ease the financial burden on people and make RTVS funding more transparent.
So more transparent.
Yeah, but there was pushback, too.
I bet. What were people worried about?
Well, if the government controls the purse strings, can RTVS really stay independent and do its job of serving the public?
That's a good question.
Right, because you don't want the government to be able to influence what RTVS reports on.
So this seemingly technical decision about funding has these huge ripple effects. It does. On the whole idea of a free and independent press.
Exactly, and it's not just about Slovakia.
Right.
Public broadcasters all over the world are facing similar challenges.
Like what?
Declining audiences, financial pressure trying to stay relevant in the digital age, all while upholding those crucial journalistic standards.
So it's a lot to juggle.
It's a lot. It's almost like a microcosm of what's happening to media globally.
That's a good way to put it.
So as we think about everything we've covered,
from traditional societies to the hypermodern world,
we can't forget that media isn't this neutral thing. It's shaped by power, by money, by technology.
It shapes us too.
It shapes us too. And that's why understanding the evolution of media is so crucial.
I'm starting to get that.
It helps us understand not just how we get information, but how it shapes our understanding of the world, our identities, and ultimately our societies.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But it's clearly essential.
Absolutely.
If we want to navigate this complex media landscape in a way that's empowering and responsible.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to connect all of this back to you, the listener.
Absolutely.
Because this isn't just ancient history.
No.
These shifts in media have a direct impact on all of our lives.
They do every day.
It's kind of easy to feel like we're just getting swept along by this like massive wave of media.
Right.
But I think as we've been talking, I'm realizing we actually have more power than we think.
Yeah, we do.
When it comes to media.
We have agency. We're not just passive consumers. We make choices every single day.
Every day.
That shape the media landscape.
Yeah. What are some of those choices?
Well, think about it. Every time you click on a clickbait headline.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
Or watch a sensationalized news segment.
Yeah.
You're sending a message to those media outlets.
What kind of message?
You're basically saying, give me more of this.
So we're actually reinforcing the kind of content that we might complain about.
In a way, yeah.
But the flip side is also true, right?
Yes, absolutely.
When we seek out diverse perspectives,
yeah.
When we support independent journalism, when we engage in like thoughtful discussions online,
right.
We're sending a different message.
You're saying this is the kind of media I want to see more of.
So it's like a feedback loop.
It is.
Our individual choices, multiplied by millions of people, actually influence the direction that media takes.
That's exactly right. And that's why media literacy is so crucial.
Media literacy, okay.
It's not just about spotting fake news or understanding biases. It's about developing that critical mindset.
Okay, that mindset.
A sense of agency.
Yeah.
A willingness to engage with difficult ideas.
So not just taking everything at face value.
Exactly.
But really thinking about it.
Questioning things.
And I think one of the big takeaways for me from this whole deep dive is that media is constructed.
It is.
It reflects power dynamics and agendas.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we have a role to play.
We do.
In shaping those dynamics.
We're not powerless.
You're not powerless.
Okay.
Good. I like that.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah, as we come to a close.
I think it's important to acknowledge that the challenges facing media and society are very real.
Yeah, there are
The
challenges.
stakes are high.
They are.
But I also feel a sense of optimism.
Okay, good.
I think we have more tools and resources than ever before to access information, to connect with others, and to make our voices heard.
And to make change.
Yeah, the key is using those tools wisely. Being critical consumers and participating in ways that align with our values.
So using our power for good.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good note to end on.
I think so.
So on that note, we've explored a lot of ground together today.
We have.
From those early thinkers grappling with the printing press to the complexities of the digital age.
All the way to hypermodernity.
But ultimately, the question is, how will you navigate this ever-evolving media landscape?
That's the question.
That's what we're leaving you with.
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep engaging.
Until next time.